He left us in debt. My son's perfect revenge broke him completely. Hey guys, if you're anything like me, you've probably spent your fair share of time scrolling through Reddit, looking for a bit of schadenfreude. You know, those stories where the underdog finally gets a win, where the jerk gets his comeuppance. Well, I've got one for you. A story so satisfying, so perfectly executed, it still brings a smile to my face years later. And it all started because of a man I once called Dad. Hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy a good revenge story, because trust me, this is a good one. Let me set the scene. Imagine a cozy, middle-class life. A house, a mortgage, 2 rambunctious little boys, a loving wife, and a hard-working husband and father. That was me. That was us. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had everything we needed, and most importantly, we had each other. The smell of Mom's apple pie filling the house on a Sunday, Dad teaching us how to throw a baseball in the backyard, the sound of laughter echoing through the halls. Those memories, they still feel real. My dad, though, he was the patriarch, the provider, the man who, in my eyes, could do no wrong. He was charming, charismatic, and incredibly persuasive. And he was, as I would learn, a colossal liar and a gambling addict. He had this presence. Dad could walk into a room and immediately command attention. He had a smile that could melt glaciers, a voice that could soothe a crying baby. He always knew what to say, how to make you feel like the most important person in the world. Even as a kid, I was in awe of him. He seemed to know everything, could do anything. He always had this air of confidence, an unwavering belief in himself that was infectious. Growing up, he was always full of big ideas, grand schemes. He'd bounce from one harebrained business venture to another, always promising a fortune just around the corner. A new restaurant, a revolutionary invention, a groundbreaking piece of real estate. He'd draw us in with these elaborate visions, painting vivid pictures of our future success. He'd regale us with stories of potential riches, private jets, and early retirement. He'd talk about how we'd travel the world, live in a mansion, and never have to worry about anything. We, his adoring family, believed him. We wanted to believe him. We wanted to be a part of his success. We loved him. We trusted him. His schemes always involved borrowing money. Small loans at first, just to get things off the ground, he'd say. A few $1,000s, repaid with interest. Enough to keep the wolves at bay. Then bigger ones. Always with the promise of a huge return. He'd bring home thick envelopes, filled with cash, and we'd all celebrate. For a while, it worked. We felt like we were part of something special, something big. But the wins were always followed by a quiet desperation, a frantic scramble for the next big score. He was always on the move, always chasing the next high. My mom, bless her heart, was skeptical. She'd voice her concerns, her quiet worries about the mounting debt. I can still see her, sitting at the kitchen table, her brow furrowed, crunching numbers on a notepad. I remember the hushed conversations she'd have with Dad, the strained silences that followed. She knew something was wrong, but she always ended up giving in. She'd try to tell him to slow down, to be more careful, to take things one step at a time. But my dad, with his silver tongue and dazzling smile, would always reassure her, promising to make it all back and more. He'd tell her she was his rock, his inspiration, and that everything he did for us. And Mom, believing in him, believing in us, would relent. He'd always involve us, his sons, in the dreams. He'd take us to the sites of his future empires, pointing out the potential, the possibilities. I can still feel the sun on my face, the excitement bubbling in my chest as we'd walk through empty lots, or old buildings, with Dad painting the picture of what they would become. He'd explain the details, the plans, the vision. We, kids, would walk around with him, believing that we would be part of a family business, something to carry on when he was gone. He'd whisper about how he was doing it all for us, for our future. He'd convince us to keep it secret, that this was our family's plan. We were his confidants, his little partners in crime, and we loved it. We felt important. We were part of something bigger than ourselves. It gave us purpose. Then came the fateful day. The day everything changed. He announced a new venture, a high-stakes real estate deal. He told us it was a sure thing. A prime piece of land, a guaranteed profit, a life-changing opportunity. He needed a significant investment to close the deal, and he'd make a killing. He convinced my mom, our aunts and uncles, even our grandparents, to invest. Everyone, trusting in his unwavering confidence, poured their savvy NGS into his hands. He talked about the big house we would buy, the fancy cars, the luxurious vacations. He promised us everything. He said he'd take care of us. He said we would never have to worry again. I felt that same excitement, the same feeling of being on the precipice of something amazing, as I always did when he had a new idea. I was sure, this time, it would be the one. I remember the day he told us, "We're set." He held up a contract, smiling, and said, "This is it, boys, we're going to be rich." He showed us the blueprints of the dream home, a massive estate, with a pool, a tennis court, and a private theater. We spent hours dreaming, discussing where our rooms would be, what car we would drive. Weeks turned into months. The excitement simmered, replaced by a nervous anticipation. Then, the whispers started. The phone calls. The worried looks. I saw Mom and Dad arguing more frequently, their voices rising and falling behind closed doors. The financial stress started to show, first in subtle ways, then in increasingly obvious ones. The new car he'd promised us got delayed. The promised trip to Disney World was cancelled. The little things, that were so normal and consistent, suddenly stopped. Then, it all came crashing down. The deal fell apart. Spectacularly. The money vanished. The big house, the fancy cars, the luxurious vacations, all just empty promises. He had gambled it all away. The details of how he lost the money are still vague to me. All I know is that he lost. He lost big. And he lost everything. The realization hit us like a ton of bricks. The banks started calling. The creditors began their relentless pursuit. Our once comfortable life crumbled around us. The house was foreclosed. We had to pack everything up, sell the furniture we owned. The car was repossessed. We had to go live with my grandmother, who was struggling herself. The shame was overwhelming. We were the talk of the town. The family everyone had been so jealous of, now living in poverty. My mom was devastated. I can still see the pain etched on her face, the tears that flowed so freely. She had trusted him, she had sacrificed for him, and he had betrayed her, and us, in the most brutal way imaginable. She had believed in him, believed in the dream, and he had shattered it into a million pieces. I remember the way she would sit alone in the kitchen, just staring out the window, her shoulders slumped, the weight of the world bearing down on her. She barely spoke. It was like a part of her had died. We were left with nothing but debt. Crushing, suffocating debt. Debt that he had racked up, and we were now forced to pay the price for. The worst part? He didn't seem to care. He had moved on to his next, big idea, leaving us to deal with the fallout. He was already talking about the next venture, as if nothing had happened. He just kept saying, "It's just a setback." He was gone. Not physically, but emotionally. He was distant, evasive, and the charming, charismatic man we once knew had vanished. The man who promised us everything. He seemed more interested in avoiding the problem than facing it. He started coming up with ridiculous excuses, blaming everything on the market, on bad luck, on anyone but himself. He refused to take responsibility for his actions. He'd tell us the numbers were wrong, that the market was rigged. It was infuriating. The audacity. The sheer lack of remorse. It was impossible. My brother and I were young men then, still in our early 20s. We were forced to work multiple jobs, just to scrape by. I felt cheated. I felt robbed of my youth, of my opportunities. We couldn't afford to go to college. We couldn't afford to pursue our dreams. We were trapped, burdened by the weight of his irresponsibility. We had to pay back the money he had borrowed, and the emotional toll that had on us, knowing he had done it to the family, made things worse. We felt like prisoners in our own lives, serving a sentence for a crime we hadn't committed. Every day was a struggle. Every bill a reminder of his failure. Every conversation with him, a reminder of the betrayal. The anger festered. The resentment built. We were angry at him, but even more angry at ourselves for believing him for so long. We'd been blinded by his charm. We'd been naive. And now, we were paying the price. We had to be strong for Mom. We had to hold the family together while he continued to disappear. Then, one day, I had an epiphany. It wasn't a sudden moment of clarity, but a slow burn, a gradual realization that finally ignited a fire within me. As I was cleaning the floors in a coffee shop and running late to my other job, I thought about how I would have been, and what my life would look like, if he hadn't done what he did. I thought about all the opportunities I'd lost, all the dreams I'd had to put on hold. That feeling that I was wasting my life, while he gallivanted around, free of consequence, became unbearable. I knew I couldn't just sit back and let him off the hook. He had destroyed our lives. He had ruined our future. He had to pay. I decided, enough was enough. He had left us in debt, but he would not escape unscathed. I started small. I began researching his finances, his current schemes. I learned about his new circle of friends, a group of investors he was trying to fleece. He'd made the classic mistake of not changing his patterns. He was back at it again. He thought he could just charm his way through anything. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. I meticulously collected information, piecing together a puzzle, a blueprint of his next downfall. Every phone call, every conversation, every meeting, they all provided a piece of the puzzle. I documented everything. I knew that I couldn't just confront him. He'd talk his way out of it. He'd charm the socks off anyone who'd listen. I needed something more concrete, something that would truly cripple him. I needed him to feel the pain he'd inflicted on us. I spent months, maybe even a year, planning my revenge. It wasn't a rushed decision. I wasn't driven by emotion alone. I needed to think. I needed to plan. I needed to be meticulous. I learned about his weaknesses, his vulnerabilities, his ego. I knew what would hurt him the most, his reputation, his money, and the respect of the people around him. He was the type of person who placed his value on these things. And I was going to use them against him. The execution had to be flawless. I wanted to show him, in the most visceral way possible, what he had done to us. It wasn't about causing him physical harm, it was about destroying the things he valued most. The plan was elaborate, a carefully constructed web. I won't go into all the details, because some of it is still legally sensitive. Suffice to say, I used his own tactics against him. I got close to his new investors, subtly planting seeds of doubt, pointing out inconsistencies in his story. I used the information I had gathered to expose his previous scams, making sure that it was all tied to the recent real estate failure and to all the debts left in its wake. I made sure everything was tied to the facts. It wasn't revenge, I told myself, it was about justice. I created fake identities, set up anonymous email accounts. I built a persona, a potential investor, who was interested in the newest venture. I was playing a part, but a familiar one. I was playing him. I had to learn to think like him, to speak like him, to understand his patterns. It was a weird thing to do. Slowly, I started to dismantle his new empire. It took time. It took patience. And it took a lot of work. But it was worth it. It was satisfying. Slowly, subtly, his new empire crumbled. The investors pulled out, one by one. I had to make sure I provided enough evidence, enough doubt, to where each person would feel like they were making their own choice. His reputation, once so meticulously crafted, was tarnished. The whispers started, the doubts, the questions. His confidence, his lifeblood, began to waver. I could see the cracks forming. He lost money. He lost friends. He lost his standing in the community. The people he had conned were starting to realize it, but now they were all on their own. The best part? He had no idea it was me. He was left utterly baffled. He couldn't understand why everything was falling apart, why his luck had suddenly run out. I imagined him pacing back and forth, desperately trying to figure out what had gone wrong. He went into denial. He was doing the best he could. He kept saying the market was the problem. He was starting a new business, this time, it was going to work out. He was still lying, still promising. Then came the final blow. I orchestrated a public confrontation, exposing his past failures, his lies, his betrayal. It was a carefully constructed event, with irrefutable evidence. A local paper had picked up the story, and the wheels were already turning. I was able to expose his crimes, not just to his new friends, but also to people in the financial world. He was finally seen for what he was, a con man, a gambler, a man who cared only about himself. He'd left a trail of financial ruin. His reputation was in tatters. The aftermath was beautiful. He lost everything. His house, his car, his social standing. He was completely broke. The man who had promised us the world, the man who had once been so sure of himself, was now a broken shell of a man. His confidence was gone. He was scared. I saw him a few months later, years after the whole ordeal. I was driving, and as I passed a park, I saw him on a bench. He was slumped on a park bench, looking old and defeated. His clothes were rumpled, and his eyes were haunted. I stopped the car. I wanted him to see me. I thought about going up to him. But then I saw that he didn't see me. He was too lost in his own misery. He was staring into space. He didn't even notice my car. And that's WH. And I knew. My revenge was complete. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about getting even. It was about the principle of the thing. It was about righting a wrong. It was about him understanding, in a way that he couldn't ignore, the pain he had caused. The pain he caused us. He had left us in debt, and I had broken him. Completely. He'd taken everything from us, and for what? For a quick buck, for a selfish gain, for the thrill of the con. He'd used us, and thrown us away like trash. And now, he was reaping what he had sown. Do I feel guilty? No. I do not. I didn't. Do I regret it? Not for a second. It was about the principle. It was about the pain he inflicted on us. It was about Mom. It was about the broken dreams and shattered promises. It was about the stolen future. My brother felt the same way. We weren't monsters. We just paid a heavy price for his decisions, and we weren't going to let it go unanswered. We had our mother to take care of. We had to be better. We had to find a way. We rebuilt our lives, brick by brick. We worked hard, we studied hard, and we carved our own paths. We did it on our own, without his help. It was a hard road, but we had each other. We found success. We found happiness. And while the scars of his actions will always be there, so is the satisfaction of knowing we finally won. We finally took back what he had stolen. We found peace in this. And I would do it all again. So, what do you guys think? Have you ever been wronged like this? Have you ever sought revenge, and was it as satisfying as mine? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. I'm sure some of you have had your own experiences. You can't just let someone do that to you, to your family. Sometimes you have to fight back. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more revenge tales. And until next time, stay safe and stay even.